The Dominion had ruled the stars for 300 years. They had conquered 11 star systems, crushed dozens of alien species, and built an empire on the bones of the weak. Their ships were massive. Their weapons could crack planets. Their soldiers knew nothing but war and victory. High Commander Rand stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest. He was 7 feet tall, covered in dark scales, with 4 arms and eyes that glowed like burning coals. He had personally led the destruction of 3 civilizations. Statues of him stood on conquered worlds. Children of slave species whispered his name in fear. Today he was looking at a small blue planet on his. Earth, the natives called it. A tiny world orbiting a yellow star at the edge of the galaxy. They had been watching it for 40 years, ever since strange signals had reached their listening posts. Radio waves, television broadcasts. The primitive species on this world had been screaming their existence into space without even knowing it. Rand had studied these transmissions with great interest. The humans, as they called themselves, were fascinating in their stupidity. They fought endless wars against each other over invisible lines drawn on maps. They argued about politics and religion while their planet slowly died from pollution. They made entertainment about alien invasions and laughed at the idea, never knowing that real aliens were already watching. "Report," Rand commanded. His voice was deep and cold. His tactical officer, a smaller named In, approached with a data tablet. "High Commander, we have completed our final analysis of the target world. The humans have achieved basic. They have small stations orbiting their planet and have sent primitive robots to explore nearby worlds. Their fastest ships use chemical rockets that would take years to cross their own system. Military capability. Laughable, High Commander. They have nuclear weapons, but their delivery systems are primitive. Their missiles could not even reach our ships in orbit. They have no energy shields, no directed energy weapons, no faster-than-light capability. Their nations maintain separate militaries that spend more time threatening each other than preparing for external threats." Rand made a sound that passed for laughter among his species. They are children playing with sharp sticks while a predator circles their camp. "Indeed, High Commander. Our projections show complete planetary conquest within 6 standard hours. Resistance will be minimal." Rand turned to look at Earth again. It was a beautiful world, he had to admit. Blue oceans, green landmasses, white clouds swirling across the surface. It would make an excellent addition to the Dominion. The humans would make useful slaves. They were creative and adaptable, good for manual labor and technical work. Those who resisted would be made into examples. The rest would learn to serve. "How many ships do we have assembled?" he asked. 500,000, High Commander. The largest invasion fleet in history. 40 carrier groups, 300,000 fighters, assault transports for 2 million ground troops. We have enough firepower to sterilize the entire planet if necessary. "It will not be necessary," Rand said. "I want the infrastructure intact. I want the population alive and working within 1 rotation of their moon. Make an example of their military installations and government centers. Destroy their communication networks. Once they see our power, they will submit." He walked closer to his 4 arms clasped behind his back. "Every species does in the end. The strong rule, the weak serve. This is the natural order of the universe." What Rand did not know, what no could have possibly known, was that humanity had been listening too. Far below, on the surface of Earth, the world looked exactly as the expected. Cities full of busy humans going about their daily lives, politicians arguing on television, celebrities posting on social media, wars being fought in distant countries. It all looked so normal, so chaotic, so primitive. But beneath the surface, something else was happening. In a bunker 3 kilometers below the Swiss Alps, Admiral Helena Vance stood in a command center that officially did not exist. She was 62 years old, with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen things that would give most people nightmares. Around her, Officers from 30 different nations worked at computer stations, speaking in hushed voices. "They have crossed the orbit of Neptune," one of her officers reported. "Current speed suggests arrival in Earth orbit within 72 hours. Vance nodded slowly. They had known this day would come. They had been preparing for it for 60 years. In 1987, a spacecraft had crashed in the frozen wilderness of Siberia. Not a human spacecraft, something else entirely, something from beyond the stars. The Soviet Union had found it first, but the secret was too big for any one nation to keep. Within months, every major government on Earth knew the truth. Humanity was not alone in the universe. The crashed ship had belonged to a species called the. They had been fleeing from the Dominion when their engines failed. Their crew was dead, but their ship's computer still worked. And in that computer was everything humanity needed to know about the galaxy they lived in. Star charts showing thousands of inhabited worlds, technical specifications for weapons and engines far beyond human science, and warnings, endless warnings about the Dominion, a ruthless empire that conquered and enslaved every species it encountered. They had been their latest victims. The message was clear. They were coming, and when they arrived, humanity would face the same fate as all the others. Unless they prepared. The world's governments made a decision. The public could never know. The panic would destroy civilization. Instead, they would continue their normal conflicts, their normal politics, their normal lives. Let any watching alien see exactly what they expected to see: a divided, primitive species ripe for conquest. But in secret, humanity united. The United Earth Defense Initiative was born in hidden meetings and classified documents. The crashed alien ship was studied by the greatest scientists from every nation, working together for the first time in history. Slowly, they began to understand. Then they began to build. 60 years of secret work, 60 years of preparation, and now the enemy was finally here. Admiral Vance looked at the main screen, showing the massive fleet moving toward Earth. 500,000 ships. It was a terrifying sight. She allowed herself a small smile. "They have no idea what is waiting for them," she said quietly. "No idea at all." Above the Earth, the stars twinkled peacefully, hiding the storm that was about to break. Admiral Helena Vance remembered the day she learned the truth. She was 23 years old, a promising young officer in the United States Navy, when men in dark suits came to her apartment. They showed her credentials that should not have existed. They told her things that should not have been possible, and they asked her to make a choice. She could continue her normal career, live a normal life, and never know what was really happening. Or she could join something bigger, something secret, something that would change everything. She chose the truth. Now, 40 years later, she stood at the center of humanity's greatest secret. The command center beneath the Swiss Alps was just one of hundreds scattered across the planet. They called it the network, a hidden web of bases, shipyards, and research facilities that had been built in complete secrecy over 6 decades. "Show me our assets," she commanded. The main screen changed. What appeared made her heart swell with pride. Hidden in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, humanity had built shipyards. Not small ones, massive facilities carved into rocks the size of mountains, invisible to any observer who did not know exactly where to look. Inside these facilities, generation after generation of engineers and workers had assembled a fleet. The first ships were crude things. Humanity had barely understood the alien technology when they started, but they learned. Year by year, decade by decade, they got better. They took the principles from the crashed vessel and made them their own. They improved on designs that aliens had used for centuries. "Current fleet strength," her aide reported. 42,000 combat-capable vessels, 12 carrier groups, 300 orbital defense platforms, 16,000 ground-based anti-orbital weapon systems hidden across 6 continents. It was not as many as they were bringing, not even close, but numbers were not everything. On the dark side of the moon, in a facility called Shadow Base, humanity had been training pilots for 30 years. These men and women flew simulators that perfectly recreated fighters, using data extracted from the crashed ship. They knew tactics better than pilots did. They had studied every battle the Dominion had ever fought, learned every weakness, memorized every pattern. And they had been waiting their entire lives for this moment. "Get me Commander," Vance said. A moment later, a face appeared on her screen. Commander James was 45 years old, the finest pilot humanity had ever produced. He commanded the First Strike Wing, 12,000 pilots who would lead the opening attack. "Admiral," he said with a nod, "my people are ready. We have been ready for a long time." "The enemy will be in range within 48 hours, Vance told him. "This is not a drill. This is not a simulation. Everything we have built, everything we have sacrificed comes down to this." Smiled, it was not a friendly smile. "Good, I am tired of hiding." On Earth's surface, the regular militaries continued their work, completely unaware of what was happening above them. Fighter jets flew patrol routes. Ships sailed the oceans. Soldiers trained for wars they would never fight. They watched all of this and saw exactly what they expected, a primitive species with no hope of resistance. They did not see the submarines sitting at the bottom of the ocean, each one carrying 100 aerospace fighters in waterproof launch tubes. They did not see the weather research stations in Antarctica that were actually directed energy weapon platforms capable of punching holes through starship armor. They did not see the network of satellites that looked like ordinary communication relays, but were actually targeting systems for a global defense grid. Humanity had learned much from the data files. They had learned about weapons and shields and faster-than-light engines, but they had also learned something more important. They had learned about the Dominion itself. They were conquerors. They had been conquering for so long that they had forgotten how to think any other way. Their tactics were rigid. Their strategies were predictable. They always used overwhelming force because they had never faced an enemy capable of real resistance. Every species they encountered was less advanced than them, surprised and unprepared. Humanity would be different. Deep in the bunker, Vance turned to face her command staff. Officers from America, Russia, China, Europe, Africa, India, South America, every major nation represented. They had worked together in secret for decades, putting aside their country's public conflicts for the greater mission. "In approximately 48 hours, we will face the greatest threat humanity has ever known," she said. 500,000 enemy ships, an empire that has never lost a war. They believe we are helpless. They believe this will be easy. She paused, looking at each face in turn. "They are wrong. We have had 60 years to prepare for this moment. 60 years of work, sacrifice, and secrecy. Every ship in our fleet represents the combined effort of our entire species. Every pilot has trained their whole life for this fight." Vance activated a control on her console. Around the world, hidden bases received her signal. Launch preparations began in asteroid shipyards. Weapons systems powered up. Pilots climbed into their cockpits. "They think they are hunting sheep," she continued. "They are about to discover that the sheep are wolves. They are about to learn what humanity is truly capable of when we fight as one." She straightened her shoulders and gave the order that would change history. "All stations, this is Admiral Vance. Execute Protocol Prometheus. I repeat, execute Protocol Prometheus. It is time to show the galaxy who we really are." Across the solar system, in hidden bases and secret shipyards, humanity answered. Engines came to life. Weapons charged. Airlocks opened onto the cold vacuum of space. The wolves were finally ready to hunt. High Commander Rand continued his journey toward Earth, completely unaware that everything he believed was wrong. He saw a divided planet. He saw primitive technology. He saw easy prey. He did not see the thousands of warships emerging from their hiding places. He did not see the weapons platforms coming online. He did not see the pilots settling into their cockpits with grim determination. But he would. Very soon he would. The fleet moved through the outer solar system like a swarm of locusts. 500,000 ships stretched across millions of kilometers of space, their formation so vast that it took light several seconds to travel from one end to the other. High Commander Rand stood on his bridge, watching the blue dot of Earth grow slowly larger on his. "We will reach optimal attack position in 6 hours, his tactical officer reported. "All units report ready. The ground assault forces are eager to begin." Rand nodded with satisfaction. This would be his greatest victory. History would remember him as the commander who brought humanity into the Dominion. Statues would be built. Songs would be sung. His name would live forever. He was thinking these pleasant thoughts when the first alarm sounded. "High Commander," In's voice was sharp with confusion. "We are detecting energy signatures in the asteroid belt, hundreds of them. No, thousands. They are appearing out of nowhere." Rand's eyes narrowed. "Explain." "I cannot, High Commander. One moment there was nothing. Now there are. Ships, many ships. They are using technology that we do not recognize." On the tactical display updated. Red dots appeared throughout the asteroid belt, spreading like a disease. As Rand watched, the number climbed higher. 1,000, 5,000, 10,000. "That is impossible," he said slowly. "The humans do not have these capabilities." Before anyone could respond, the universe exploded. The hidden weapons platforms opened fire first. Directed energy beams lanced out from asteroids that had seemed like dead rocks moments before. Each beam carried enough power to slice through armor like a hot knife through soft butter. The first wave of scouts simply vanished, transformed into expanding clouds of gas and debris. Then came the human ships. They rose from everywhere, from the shadows of asteroids, from craters on distant moons, from hidden bases that had waited in silence for 60 years. Sleek, angular vessels that moved with a grace they had never seen. Their engines burned with a fierce blue light, their weapons charged with deadly purpose. Commander James led the first strike wing through the chaos. His fighter was small compared to the massive warships, but it was fast and deadly. The cockpit displays showed him everything he needed to know: enemy positions, friendly forces, firing solutions. After 30 years of simulations, flying against real ships felt almost easy. "All wings, this is strike lead," he called over the radio. "Break and attack, make them pay for every kilometer." 12,000 human fighters screamed into the formation. They did not fly like the expected. They did not use the predictable patterns of lesser species. Instead, they moved like water flowing around rocks, constantly shifting, constantly adapting, impossible to pin down. They fired their weapons in carefully coordinated volleys, just as they always did. But the humans were not where the weapons expected them to be. They slipped through gaps in the fire, found blind spots in the sensors, struck at weak points that should have been secret. On the bridge of the Eternal Conquest, High Commander Rand watched in disbelief as his fleet began to die. "How are they doing this?" he demanded. "Their ships use our technology, they know our tactics. How is this possible?" No one had an answer. The battle spread across the solar system. Human carrier groups emerged from hiding and launched wave after wave of fighters. Orbital defense platforms around Earth activated, creating a web of deadly fire that nothing could penetrate. Submarines in Earth's oceans launched their hidden fighters into the sky, adding more forces to the growing swarm. But they were not defeated yet. They had 500,000 ships for a reason. They began to recover from their initial shock, reforming their lines, bringing their massive firepower to bear. Human ships started to die too, torn apart by plasma cannons and missile barrages. Captain David commanded the carrier Defiance, one of humanity's largest warships. He stood on his bridge and watched the battle unfold on a dozen screens. They were adapting, just as intelligence had predicted. They were bringing up their heavy battleships, trying to create a wall of fire that the human fighters could not penetrate. "Signal all carriers," he ordered. "Execute Formation Omega. Time to show them our real surprise." The human carriers had been holding back, staying behind the fighter's screen. Now they moved forward, forming a massive wedge aimed directly at the heart of the fleet. But they were not alone. From behind the carriers came the battleships. Humanity had built them in the deepest asteroid shipyards, using every trick and technique learned from 60 years of alien technology. They were massive, almost as large as the flagships. Their armor was thick. Their weapons were terrible, and there were hundreds of them. The UES Prometheus led the charge, its engines blazing like a small sun. On its bridge, Admiral Vance watched the enemy fleet through narrowed eyes. "All battleships open fire," she commanded. The universe turned white. Human weapons tore into the formation. Ships that had conquered worlds died in seconds, ripped apart by weapons they had never imagined. They fired back desperately, but their shots scattered against human shields or missed entirely as human ships danced aside. On the Eternal Conquest, High Commander Rand felt his ship shake from another impact. Warning lights flashed across the bridge. Officers shouted damage reports that grew worse by the minute. "This cannot be happening," he whispered. "We are the Dominion, we do not lose." But they were losing, badly. Commander's fighter swooped past a burning cruiser, his weapons leaving a trail of destruction. All around him, his pilots fought with the fury of people defending their home. They had waited their whole lives for this moment. They had trained endlessly, sacrificed everything, kept the greatest secret in human history. Now, finally, they could show the universe what humanity was made of. "All units press the attack." Admiral Vance's voice came over the radio, calm and steady despite the chaos. "They came here expecting an easy victory. Let us teach them the cost of underestimating the human race." The battle continued to rage, and they continued to die. Earth hung in the background, blue and beautiful, watching its children fight for survival among the stars. The battle lasted 3 days. 3 days of constant fighting. 3 days of fire and death among the stars. 3 days that would change the course of galactic history forever. They had numbers. Even after the devastating surprise attack, they still had hundreds of thousands of ships. They regrouped, reformed their lines, and pushed back with the desperate fury of warriors who could not accept defeat. Their commanders screamed orders. Their ships poured fire into the human formations. They threw everything they had at the small blue world that had dared to resist. But humans had something they had never encountered before. They had adaptability. On the second day, they changed their tactics. They spread their fleet wide, trying to surround the human forces and attack from all directions at once. It was a strategy that had crushed a dozen other species. Admiral Vance saw it happening. Within minutes, she had reorganized the entire human fleet into a new formation. Small, fast groups that could strike and retreat. Larger battleships that could punch through any attempt to surround them. They found themselves chasing shadows while human torpedoes ripped into their flanks. When they concentrated their forces, humans spread out. When they spread out, humans concentrated. Every move was countered. Every strategy was predicted. The data from the ship had given humanity 60 years to study tactics. They knew every pattern, every doctrine, every weakness. And then there were the humans themselves. They were soldiers. They were bred for war, engineered for efficiency, trained to follow orders without question. They were strong and disciplined, but they had never faced an enemy that would not break. On the second day, an assault group managed to break through the human lines. 50 warships headed straight for Earth, ignoring the fighters that tried to stop them. They were going to bombard the planet, kill millions, show these primitive humans what real power looked like. A single human ship moved to block them. The destroyer Salamander, small and commanded by a young captain named Maria Santos. "Captain, we cannot stop 50 ships alone," her first officer said urgently. "We should retreat and regroup with the main fleet." Santos shook her head. "If we retreat, they reach Earth. They start bombing cities. Our families are down there, our homes, our entire species." She looked at her crew, 30 young men and women who had trained their whole lives for this moment. "We do not retreat. We hold them here until reinforcements arrive, however long it takes." The Salamander flew directly into the formation. Its weapons fired constantly, targeting engines, weapon systems, anything that could slow the enemy down. They pounded the small ship with everything they had. Armor melted. Systems failed. Crew members died at their stations. But the Salamander did not stop. It twisted and turned through the enemy ships, always in the way, always fighting. Captain Santos used every trick she had learned, every technique from the simulations, every desperate maneuver she could imagine. For 47 minutes, one small human ship held back 50 warships. By the time reinforcements arrived, the Salamander was a shattered wreck, barely holding together, but it was still fighting. Of the original crew of 30, 12 survived. Captain Santos was not among them. But Earth was safe. Stories like this happened throughout the battle. A pilot who flew her damaged fighter into a carrier's engine, destroying both ships. Marines who held a boarding action for 6 hours against overwhelming odds, buying time for their ship to escape. Engineers who crawled through burning corridors to repair critical systems, knowing they would not survive. They did not understand. Their soldiers fought because they were ordered to fight. They served because they were bred to serve. The concept of sacrifice, of willingly dying for something greater than yourself, was foreign to them. Humans died by the thousands, but they did not break, they did not surrender, they did not run. And slowly, impossibly, they began to win. On the third day, the fleet shattered. High Commander Rand stood on the bridge of the Eternal Conquest as his empire crumbled around him. Of the 500,000 ships he had brought to conquer Earth, less than 40,000 remained. The rest were debris, spreading through space in a cloud of metal and frozen bodies. "High Commander, we must retreat," In urged. "The battle is lost. We can return with more ships, more forces." "We are the Dominion," Rand said, his voice hollow. "We have conquered the galaxy. We do not lose to primitives." Warning alarms screamed. On the human boarding craft attached themselves to the flagship's hull. Moments later, the ship shook as breaching charges blew holes in the armor. Human Marines poured through the gaps. They moved through the corridors with terrible efficiency. The crew fought back, but humans had been practicing for this too. They knew the layout of ships. They knew where to go, what to target, how to fight in the tight spaces. One by one, the defenders fell. Rand drew his ceremonial blade as the bridge doors exploded inward. Human soldiers spread through the room, weapons raised. A tall human stepped forward, his face hidden behind a combat helmet. "High Commander Rand," the human said, "by order of the United Earth Defense Initiative, you are under arrest for crimes against sentient species. You will face trial on Earth." Rand looked at his blade. For a moment, he considered using it either on the humans or on himself, but curiosity won out. He wanted to understand. He wanted to know how everything he believed had been so wrong. He let the blade fall. "How?" he asked quietly. "How did you do this?" The Marine removed his helmet. His face was young, covered in sweat and dust, but his eyes were old. "You looked at us and saw weakness. You saw our divisions, our conflicts, our primitive technology. You saw what we wanted you to see." He stepped closer. "But underneath, we were preparing, learning, building, waiting. 60 years of patience. 60 years of secrecy, because we knew you were coming and we knew what you would do to us if we were not ready. Ran was taken away in chains, the first alien commander in history to be captured alive by a species they had tried to conquer. As the surviving enemy ships fled toward open space, Admiral Vance addressed humanity. "The battle is over," she said. "We have won. But this is not the end. The Dominion still exists. Billions of beings remain enslaved across 11 star systems. They will return for revenge." She paused. "I recommend we do not give them the chance. We have shown the galaxy that humanity is not prey. Now it is time to show them what we do to those who threaten our home." Across Earth and throughout the fleet, humanity listened. And humanity agreed. 1 year passed. Earth had changed in ways that most people were still trying to understand. The secret was out. The governments had told the truth about the crashed ship in Siberia, about the threat, about 60 years of hidden preparation. Some people were angry about the deception. Many more were simply grateful to be alive. The memorial ceremonies seemed endless. 30,000 human soldiers had died in the Battle of Earth. Their names were carved into monuments on every continent. Schools were named after them. Holidays were created to honor their sacrifice. Children learned about Captain Santos and the Salamander in their history classes. But grief was not the only emotion humanity felt. There was also determination. The Dominion had ruled 11 star systems for 300 years. In that time, they had enslaved dozens of species, crushed countless rebellions, and killed billions of innocent beings. They had built their empire on fear and cruelty. And now, for the first time in their history, they were afraid. News of the Battle of Earth spread through the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Slave species who had served for generations suddenly began to ask questions. If the primitive humans could win, what else was possible? If one species could stand against the Dominion, could others follow? Rebellions broke out on a dozen worlds. They scrambled to maintain control, but their forces were scattered and demoralized. Their greatest fleet had been destroyed by a species they had dismissed as inferior. Their most famous commander sat in a human prison, waiting for trial. Everything they believed about their own superiority had been proven wrong. Admiral Helena Vance stood on the bridge of the UES Prometheus as it prepared to leave Earth orbit. Around her, the largest human fleet ever assembled was taking formation. 2,000 warships, 40,000 fighters, assault transports carrying 300,000 Marines. They were not going to defend anymore. They were going hunting. "Fleet status?" she asked. "All ships report ready, Admiral," her aide responded. "The first Liberation Fleet awaits your command." Vance looked at the Earth hung there, blue and beautiful, recovering from the fear of near destruction. She had fought her whole life to protect that world. Now she would fight to make sure no one ever threatened it again. But there was another reason, too. Standing beside her on the bridge were beings who were not human. A tall, thin creature with silver skin and large dark eyes. A muscular figure covered in brown fur with a face like a wolf. A small being that floated in a specialized suit filled with liquid. These were representatives of enslaved species, former prisoners who had escaped to Earth over the years, hopping to find a species that might one day help free their people. That day had come. "Open a channel to the fleet," Vance commanded. She took a deep breath before speaking. 60 years ago, a ship crashed on Earth. Inside, we found a warning about an empire that conquers and enslaves. We were told to prepare, and we did. We spent 6 decades building in secret, training in silence, waiting for the enemy to come. She paused. The enemy came. We were ready, and we showed the Dominion that humanity does not kneel. On every ship in the fleet, crews listened in respectful silence. But our fight is not over. Across 11 star systems, billions of beings live under chains. They have known nothing but cruelty and fear for generations. They have prayed for freedom that never came. They have watched their children taken, their homes destroyed, their hope crushed. Vance's voice grew stronger. Today, we answer their prayers. Today, we bring freedom to worlds that have never known it. Today, humanity stops being the protected and becomes the protector. They built their empire by preying on the weak. They forgot that eventually, they might meet someone who protects the weak instead. She smiled, and there was steel behind it. We are coming for every slave they have taken, every world they have conquered, every being they have harmed, and we will not stop until the Dominion is nothing but a bad memory. The fleet jumped too, leaving Earth behind in a flash of blue light. The first world they reached was called. It had been conquered 200 years ago. The native species, had been forced to work in mining operations, digging precious minerals from their own planet for their masters. Resistance was punished by death. Hope had died generations ago. When human ships appeared in their sky, the garrison prepared to fight. They expected another battle like the one at Earth, desperate and bloody. They were not prepared for what happened next. Human Marines landed at the slave camps first. They did not come as conquerors. They came as liberators. They broke chains that had held them for 2 centuries. They gave food to beings who had never eaten a full meal in their lives. They told the slaves that they were free, and meant it. They did not know how to react at first. Freedom was a concept their grandparents had barely remembered, but slowly, understanding spread. Tears flowed. Songs that had been forbidden for generations were sung openly for the first time. The garrison surrendered without a fight. They had seen the reports from Earth. They knew they could not win. More importantly, they could see the look in human eyes, the absolute determination, the cold anger at what had been done to innocent beings. Fighting would only make their punishment worse. Admiral Vance walked through the liberated slave camp, surrounded by beings who reached out to touch her, to make sure she was real. They were humanoid, with pale blue skin and delicate features. They looked at humans with something close to worship. "You came," an elderly said, tears streaming down his face. "The stories said someone would come. We never believed, but you came." Vance took his hand gently. "We almost did not make it ourselves. A ship crashed on our world carrying warnings about your people saved us by giving us time to prepare." The elderly stared at her. "They were our cousins. They escaped conquest. We thought they died in the stars. Their ship crashed on Earth. They did die, but their knowledge saved our species, and now we will use that gift to save every species they have harmed." The liberation took 3 days. When it was done, human ships left a garrison behind to help the rebuild. Then the fleet moved on to the next world. And the next. And the next. Over the following months, the first liberation fleet cut a path through space. Every world they freed added more strength to their cause. Former slaves volunteered to join the fight. Species that had been enemies under rule found common cause in freedom. The rebellion that humanity had started grew into something much larger. The Dominion fought back, of course. They gathered their remaining fleets and launched counterattacks. But they were fighting on too many fronts, against too many enemies, with forces that no longer believed in their own superiority. One by one, their worlds fell, not to conquest but to liberation. Standing on the bridge of the Prometheus, Admiral Vance watched another fortress burn in the distance. Around her, officers from a dozen species worked together in perfect coordination. Humans and in beings whose names she still struggled to pronounce. Her aide approached with a data tablet. "Admiral, we have received word from Earth. The Galactic Liberation Council has officially formed. 37 species have joined. They have elected you as their first Supreme Commander." Vance shook her head slowly, still amazed at how much had changed. A year ago, humanity had been a secret species hiding behind a mask of primitiveness. Now they led an alliance that would reshape the galaxy. They looked at us and saw prey, she said quietly. They did not understand that humanity's greatest strength was never our weapons or our technology. It was our refusal to accept defeat, our willingness to sacrifice for each other, our belief that freedom is worth any price. She looked out at the stars, stars that were finally free. We came to the galaxy as defenders of our home. We will remain as defenders of all who cannot defend themselves. This is who we are. This is what we choose to be. The wolves of Earth had found their purpose, and the galaxy would never be the same.